So yeah, so I'm going to talk about how whistleblowers are basically the way that we make sure that large organizations do uphold ethical standards. And when whistleblowers speak out, they're making a huge risk for themselves. And I'm going to talk about how big that risk has been for recent whistleblowers about really important things where whistleblowers have called out really, really bad actions, including illegal actions by the government. I'm going to talk about government whistleblowers today, but whistleblowers applies to, well, I'm going to go into the definition, but basically, a whistleblower is anyone that exposes information or activity in an organization, usually a government or corporate entity that's illegal, unethical, or harmful. And those should be aligned to me. Causing significant unnecessary harm I've talked about in past events, I think is, the one rule that we should all abide by globally. And if it causes significant unnecessary harm, it should be illegal and considered unethical. And then whistleblowers typically report violations like fraud, corruption, regulatory breaches, threats to public safety, and there's almost always a huge personal risk to doing that, at least losing your job, but also potentially losing your life or even your sanity, as some people would call it, although we'll get into that. I'm not going to refer to it as that because I think that's not the right way to do it, but it literally is, you know, the amount of harm done to whistleblowers is really, to me, inexcusable. So whistleblowers are really the ones that find when things are going wrong. And so if we don't create an environment where whistleblowers are comfortable speaking the truth, then you're gonna, like I said earlier, you shoot the messenger every time. Eventually, you're gonna have no messengers. And you've probably seen this in organizations that are very top down, where the boss is always right, and anyone who disagrees with the boss gets fired. Well, suddenly no one disagrees with the boss. And the same thing is true with whistleblowers. Um, Whistleblowers report the wrongdoing either to internal authorities like a compliance officer or regulatory agencies, the media, or law enforcement. And we'll talk about a bunch of those. And of course, they could lose their jobs, they could lose their lives, and they could lose so much from reporting these things because they're going against an established institution, which is often very hierarchical in nature and to whom the people at the highest positions are very protective of their power. And part of their power sometimes is to want to get away with stuff. And I think whistleblowers are the way we know whether or not someone is trying to get away with stuff. And I think we don't, as average people, don't want to be in an environment where those in power can get away with stuff, or we ourselves can be the target of the malfeasance going on, whatever it is that the whistleblowers are calling out as causing harm. And so there are, as was mentioned in the social, there are legal protections for whistleblowers, like the Whistleblower Protection Act for government employees or Dodd-Frank for financial sector employees, which try to shield them from retaliation. Um, I will give a bunch of examples where that shield did not work very well. And that said, how should whistleblowers be treated? I've already kind of given my spiel on this, but I'm going to say it again is, we should not just be accepting or not punishing these people. We should be celebrating them. We should be making them heroes. We should be giving them money. Like as a public, we should have like public rewards for actually accurately calling out bad behavior in government. To me, we should be like giving these people a huge incentive, not disincentives, to be whistleblowers. And I'm going to be showing the government leadership under which these whistleblowers were punished. And you will see it goes across both sides of the aisle. This is not a Republican Democrat thing. This is a people in power and people not in power thing. And so we're going to look at a bunch of whistleblowers. I'm going to do it in chronological order. I think that that's helpful to sort of see how things have evolved over time. I don't know that there's a clear delineation on evolution over time, but I will say the first guy was, in my opinion, the one who was the most maybe it's not that he was the smartest, but he was around during a time when it was easier to hide. Let's put it that way. With the advent of the internet, it's really hard to hide stuff these days. Like there's so much, and in fact, a lot of these whistleblowers pointed out that there was a lot of illegal government surveillance, which we'll get into, which might make it harder for people to hide who they are when they become a whistleblower. So, Mark Felt was only known as Deep Throat, who was the guy that turned in Richard Nixon after he died. So he allowed it to be known who he was after he died, so that it wouldn't be like a mystery for the rest of eternity, like the JFK assassination, which I argue the official story makes no sense. So that's why there are so many conspiracy theories, but seems to be like an unsolved mystery. That said, he was the guy that leaked the information to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who were journalists. And that led to the uncovering of the Watergate scandal and eventually ended up with a, how do I say, a political arms race between the Republican Party, who initially defended Nixon, but then eventually the press got so bad that they had to say, look, we're going to have Nixon Nixon agreed to resign, but then he subsequently got pardoned for illegal behavior that he should have been put in jail for. And quite frankly, I think that was a horrible, horrible precedence to set. I think Mark was very brave in calling out the bad behavior, but I think it's unfortunate that Nixon never ended up in jail. And if there are people who don't know what happened with the Watergate scandal, I can go into that after the presentation. I didn't go into details on that. But he was actually investigated, by the way, but he was never prosecuted for the leaks because they didn't really know whether or not it was him. But he was one of the suspects when they were investigating who might have leaked the information. Next person is Bill Binney. This was under President George Bush. Binney was a former NSA official. He raised concerns about the NSA's mass surveillance program, which he believed violated the Fourth Amendment of U.S. citizens. And he criticized the agency's inefficiency and wastefulness in what was called the Trailblazer Project, which was that illegal surveillance, mass surveillance program, which was actually considered illegal. Post full unveiling, as I understand it. He basically had the FBI raid him. He faced legal scrutiny, but he was never actually charged. Um, and so that was one person who did not get in trouble for it. But I also have to say, when this happened, I knew nothing about it. So I think I don't know any. I'm curious, a raise of hands, did anyone know who Bill Binney was? Okay, we got one, two. All right, so two people out of a group of, how many are we now? 21. So I think he got away with it because it wasn't really super public, what he said. Didn't get spread all over the airwaves. Um, Next person I want to talk about is John Kiriakou. This was under President George Bush, and Kiriakou was a former CIA officer, and he was the first government official to confirm the use of waterboarding, which is considered internationally a form of torture, when the U.S. was interrogating Al-Qaeda suspects. And he was charged under the Espionage Act, which means that you're basically going against your country, like committing espionage, like selling nuclear secrets to China would be what you would be charged with under the Espionage Act. And he was charged under other laws in 2012. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison for disclosing the identity of a covert operative to a journalist. He served his sentence and was released in 2015. The U.S. was identified for violating the Geneva Convention, which was an agreement after World War II that we wouldn't torture people or allow people to be tortured under government control. But the US government never acknowledged that it was torture. They simply renamed the torture as enhanced interrogation techniques. Because what do we do if we're a person in power and, our reputation looks bad? Like if you look at what happened in Burma, right? The Burmese government got a lot of bad international press. So what did they do? They renamed the country because they were the junta and they could do that. And suddenly all the bad press of Burma no longer counted because now it was called Myanmar. So I still call it Burma, sort of in rebellion against the junta for trying to change the name and think that they lose their horrible atrocities that they've committed there. Um, there's another country that needs whistleblower protection. So they also included in those enhanced interrogation techniques include it were things like they would understand the psychology of the person that they were trying to get information out of. So, for example, if someone was an arachnophobe, they were afraid of spiders, they would put their face in a thing full of spiders. Now they were harmless spiders, but they didn't say that, right? I think they were saying they were actually poisonous spiders, and they were like, if you don't tell us right away, then blah blah blah. They did sleep deprivation, all kinds of things that, you know, anyone that saw what the US did, to try to interrogate Al Qaeda, would very easily agree that it was torture. But our government would never acknowledge that. They just said it's enhanced interrogation techniques. So kudos to John for let's at least have him be a hero in my eyes, and hopefully some of yours, for pointing out the wrongdoing of our government. Another one is now known as Chelsea Manning. I forget what his original name was, but this is him. He was a man, and he did not have uh, um, transsexual tendencies, as far as I know, when he, under the presidency of Barack Obama, he basically leaked classified military and diplomatic documents to WikiLeaks, exposing a lot of US military actions in Afghanistan and Iraq, basically including how many civilians and journalists were killed. A lot of that was drone action, and showing that the drones were not as effective at laser targeting as they were supposed to be. He was arrested, also convicted under the Espionage Act, sentenced to 35 years in prison, but later it was commuted in by President Obama in 2017 after serving 7 years. But I'm going to go into Mr. or Ms. Manning's situation in a little bit more detail here because I think it's necessary. So I'm going to give a timeline on, I'm going to say his or her because I think that both are accurate, although she now prefers to be called a she, so I should probably gender her as such, but I'll explain why I'm hesitant to do that. Chelsea Manning was basically arrested in Iraq for disclosing the information to WikiLeaks in May of 2010. It was published by the New York Times, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, and it was largely military and diplomatic documents, covering up the CIA torture program, other matters of public interest. She was transferred to a U.S. military base in Kuwait and then to Quantico Marine Base in Virginia in April of 2011 after being held for almost a year in solitary confinement in Kuwait and Quantico. Now, let's put that in context. I don't know if anyone knows this, but I'm going to look up real quick. I remember the amount that is considered to be normal. Like, what's the? Let me just do a quick ChatGPT. It's a very usually like people are social animals, so wow, that's kind of scary. So usually it's a few days to a few weeks. Now, long-term solitary is considered 60 to 90 days. We're talking about a 1 year solitary confinement. So you basically, when you're held alone and you have no interaction socially with anyone else for an entire year, you know, it's typically considered that people are it creates mental illness basically. And I don't actually think that being trans is a mental illness, even though the psychology book, whatever it is, DSM calls it a mental illness. But I will say that Mr. Manning was not, as far as I understand it, even considering being transsexual when he went into solitary confinement, but while in solitary confinement, for a year, decided that he was going to be a she, and she had been stripped naked regularly, belonged to isolated confinement and sleep deprivation, deprived of any means or opportunity to exercise, stripped of reading glasses so she couldn't read. Almost 300 academics, most of them legal scholars, signed a letter objecting to her treatment. Um, the Shortly before her transfer, the ACLU actually sent then Defense Secretary Robert Gates a letter objecting to her treatment as cruel and unusual. Um, the United Nations Special Report on Torture, Juan Mendez, formally ruled that the U.S. government's treatment of Chelsea was cruel, inhuman, and degrading. The Pentagon refused to allow him to meet with her. Chelsea's court-martial trial began in June of 2013. Imagine how you would do facing court-martial trials after being in solitary confinement for a year. Um, so she's initially charged with aiding the enemy, despite the fact that the government never claimed she directly provided any military adversaries any information. And the charge was akin to treason, punishable by death. Then in July of 2013, she's convicted of 17 of the 22 charges, but acquitted of aiding the enemy. The following month, she's sentenced to 35 years in prison when a soldier who shared information with the press and public is punished far more harshly than others who tortured prisoners and killed civilians. Something is seriously wrong with our justice system, said the ACLU. And I don't agree with the ACLU on everything, but in this one, I think they were absolutely in the right. I don't agree with them on Citizens United. They think giving money is free speech. I think that's nonsense. We can talk about that another day, and we did. But they do a lot of fighting for the common person and the people who are, they have a lot of really smart lawyers at the ACLU. I used to donate to them before the Citizens United decision, disclosure. I stopped doing it once they sided with Citizens United. But it was the heaviest sentence handed down to a whistleblower or leaker in US history, almost 20 times the pre-Obama period. So that gives you a sense that Obama was really hard on whistleblowers. I think he did a lot of good, but he was really hard on whistleblowers, and I think that was a huge injustice. In August of 2013, Chelsea publicly announced that she's transgender and seeking hormone therapy as part of her transition during incarceration. The military, despite diagnosing her with gender dysphoria, stated that it does not provide hormone therapy or sex reassignment surgery for gender identity disorder. Next person is Thomas Drake. Again, under Obama, Drake was a former NSA executive and disclosed information about the wasteful spending on the NSA Trailblazer project. Wow, we have two people that had to whistleblow on the same project that was so overly spent, as well as the fact that it was doing unlawful domestic surveillance after 9/11. Well, he was indicted under the Espionage Act, but he later accepted a plea deal for a minor charge after the case against him collapsed. The case was seen as part of an example of overreach in using the Espionage Act against whistleblowers. So I find it interesting that some of these people are getting away, from major problems, and others are having the book thrown at them. But either way, this sends a very clear message to anyone that wants to be a whistleblower that you do this, there's a very significant risk that you're going to be, in real big trouble. So let's go into what the Trailblazer project is in a little more detail, because this is the second time it was mentioned. And quite frankly, before I researched this, I had never heard of the Trailblazer project. So I think it's worth going into in a little bit of detail. So it was a controversial surveillance program initiated by the NSA, which, by the way, the joking name for it internally, I believe, was No Such Agency, because the NSA was never publicly announced. It was an agency that was secret to even the US public for a very long time. And it started under President Bush. It was designed to analyze data and communications from a variety of sources like emails and phone calls to look at potential threats. They wanted to modernize the way that they massively handled information due to the rise of the internet because of the post 9/11 national security concerns. The problem is that it had huge numbers of failures. It was very inefficient. There were huge cost overruns, and it ended up being scrapped after costing billions of dollars without producing a working system. Critics argued that it also violated privacy rights because it involved a collection and analysis of vast amounts of data on US citizens with no oversight or safeguards. So we're guaranteed by the Constitution the right to privacy and not to be searched, not to have search and seizure. Well, this is digital search, and they're doing it with no oversight. And I'll keep going, but um, several NSA whistleblowers, including Drake, raised concerns about the project. They highlighted not only the waste, but the potential abuse of civil liberties due to the mass surveillance of the program. They argued that they had better, cheaper alternatives for surveillance and data analysis that actually would have had better privacy protections, but were ignored in favor of Trailblazer. And what this sounds like to me is in a large organization, you have a lot of politics. Whoever was in charge of Trailblazer probably had a lot more political sway than the person in charge of the alternative, which was called Thin Thread at the time. And in response to the whistleblowing, the U.S. government charged him under the Espionage Act, um, which, again, that's what you do to like someone who's a spy that discloses sensitive national security information. So after significant public outcry and legal battles, most charges were dropped. And I will say I don't remember if I have this later in this pitch, but I'll just mention that the surveillance was considered illegal, and the U.S. government decided because it was found to be illegal and it was publicly disclosed, they retroactively legalized it after the fact. So that's where our search and seizure went. People who claim that this was under the Republican Party, who claims that they're in line with the Constitution, but if they were in line with the Constitution, they wouldn't say digital search is possible without a warrant. And here now in the US, digital search is very legal without a warrant. Um, Next is Edward Snowden. So this was under Barack Obama. So going back to the Democrats, you'll see this is a two-party system that loves to torture whistleblowers. So Snowden was a former NSA contractor that revealed the surveillance programs that I'm talking about, collecting phone metadata and internet activity of US citizens without their knowledge. The Snowden was charged under the Espionage Act for theft of government property and unauthorized communication of national defense information. Well, if the government was doing something illegal, why would we say that that's communication of national defense information that should be protected under the Whistleblower Act as saying, hey, look, I'm trying to stop the government from doing something illegal. They're trying to do something illegal and they should be held accountable. They're the ones that are holding us accountable to the laws. They should hold themselves accountable to the laws too. And now we, by the way, have a Supreme Court who has said that um, a, a, a president, as long as they're acting in an official capacity, can never be charged for anything, which means that if Biden wanted to, he could actually tell the FBI to kill Donald Trump right now. They would kill him, and there would be no repercussions for Biden because it was an official act. And Biden's not going to do that. But if Trump becomes president, would he do that? And that's another question that people can ask themselves. Um, so, um, he fled to Hong Kong, by the way, and guess where he's hiding? He's hiding in Russia because they're the one country that can actually protect him from the US government. Isn't it crazy that someone who points out that the US government was violating our own laws has to run to Russia, a place where Putin kills all of the people who challenged him politically, or he puts them in jail, one or the other, or he puts them in jail until he kills them. And that's where Snowden went because Snowden hurt the US's reputation enough that Russia really liked that. So they were willing to have him live in exile in Russia. So the government revoked his passport, and obviously he hasn't returned to the US. If he did, he would be in really bad shape. Reality Winner. Yes, this is her real name, Reality Winner. It's a super cool name. She was a contractor for the NSA under Donald Trump's presidency, classified a report detailing Russian interference with the 2016 US election to the media, and she was arrested and charged under the Espionage Act. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison in 2018 and was released on good behavior in June of 2021. Well, if we knew that the Russians interfered with the 2016 election, why would we consider that a valid election in the first place? Why wouldn't we say, hey, wait, we should be, securing our election so that it doesn't have interference. And if the government knew that Russia was interfering with the election, why didn't they do anything about it? A couple of questions to think about. And next, I'm going to talk about Daniel Hale. Start the wrongdoing, quote unquote, was done under President Donald Trump. He was a former Air Force intelligence analyst, and he leaked classified documents exposing the U.S. drone assassination program because of the number of civilian casualties caused by drone strikes. He was also charged with the Espionage Act and pleaded guilty in 2021, sentenced to 45 months in prison. So I would argue that this is absolutely the worst way we could treat whistleblowers. Like, you can't think of a worse way to treat whistleblowers than to make them run away to our enemies or torture them and this is whistleblowers that are pointing out that our own government is torturing people, violating the Geneva Convention, illegally spying on US citizens, all this horrible stuff. If we don't incentivize people to do this rather than create these huge disincentives, then we're going to end up with very little democracy left because our government will have unchecked power, which is exactly the way the governments are in places that we criticize, like Russia and China. And we say those governments have unchecked power. It's not right. The average citizen doesn't have a say. Well, yes, we get to vote for our Congress people, but the very Congress people we voted for voted to legalize these illegal activities in retrospect. So, and also they chose to punish the whistleblowers, but not punish the people who did the torturing. What about the people who did the torturing? I want to find who those people are in our government and get rid of them. Let's fire them at the very least. They shouldn't be in the same positions they were before they tortured someone. Or let's look at the very senior people that ordered the torturing. Like, let's have an investigation into this stuff. But let's not just sweep it under the rug and punish the whistleblowers. If we do that, we're not going to end up with much of a democracy left if we have one after this coming election. And I would say we should be writing to our Congress people and saying that whistleblowers should be celebrated, not prosecuted, and that if they don't do this, that we're going to vote them out of office. Like, we got to get rid of these politicians that think that whistleblowers should be punished. It's ridiculous. We want the government to be held accountable. We as citizens want the government to be held accountable to our own laws. And we want them to actually be protecting us, not torturing us or spying on us illegally. So and we should be telling these government officials that they should be, finding who are the people who authorize the illegal and unethical activity and getting rid of them. They should be fired from their jobs. Like, no one that does this type of stuff, torturing, even if it's Al Qaeda people. And for those that don't know the history, like, we were a large part of the reason, the US government's actions were a large part of the reason for 9/11. If you trace it back, the movie Charlie Wilson's War does a good job of popularizing that story for those that aren't familiar with it. So if you're not familiar with like why the people that blew up the Twin Towers did so, please watch the movie Charlie Wilson's War and you'll better understand it. It's the irresponsible acts of our own government that are making the rest of the world dislike us or hate us. And we have to hold our own government accountable, and if we don't, no one else will. So the last thing I have is, was this helpful? Did you learn anything? Can you apply this in your daily life? Do you want to write your senator? And I would love for you to consider, ways that you can be an advocate for whistleblowers in organizations you guys are a part of, or to consider being one yourself and trying to do so anonymously so that no one will know who it was that reported it. Because I think the guy, Deep Throat, Mark, was the one that, lived his whole life just a normal life, not having to worry about the repercussions. So do your best to be secret agent, man. If you're going to be a whistleblower, don't tell anyone you're going to do it. Upload the data anonymously to WikiLeaks and just let it come out that way. But I would love to know in the chat if you learned anything. Was this helpful? And with that, I'm going to move on to the conversation portion of the evening. And for that, I'm going to 35 minutes. So we have plenty of time for conversation. I do want to ask everyone to limit comments and questions to one comment or question at a time, and the length of that comment and question to 2 or 3 minutes so we can get around to everybody. If we end up in a situation where there are no hands up, we can go longer. I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask their questions. And by the way, if someone speaks up and you want to respond to them, just jump in. And if you want to respond to what I say, just jump in. Like, everybody's welcome to just jump in and say what you want to say after the person finishes talking, but keep those quick clarifying questions or comments to less than 20 seconds or 30 seconds. So with that said, yes, please raise hands. Yana, go ahead, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Feel free to correct me.
Okay, I have two questions so far.
Yeah.
Can you name me anyone who was killed in China or Russia, not just for espionage, but for any other political reasons? And number two, do you use the word dissidents instead of whistleblowers? I hope it's 20 seconds. Thank
No,
you.
you have more than 20 seconds. You have 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm sorry. What did you ask me to look for as far as anyone that was killed in China or Russia? You mean for political
Yeah,
reasons, like for being a whistleblower?
yeah, which proofs and what names?
You mean for political reasons?
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that. And what was the second thing you asked?
The second one, do you use the word dissident for whistleblowers or instead?
We don't use that word. I didn't use it, and I don't think we use that in the US generally.
Is there any reason?
Because we don't see them as dissidents. We see them as people who are pointing out actual wrongdoing. Um, and so yeah, it's not probably the government would want to call them dissidents, but citizens wouldn't. I'm going to give examples and I'm going to just actually put them in the chat for Russia, and then oh, this is probably way too much to. I'm going to give you a bunch of names that Russia has that Putin has gotten rid of um, for whistleblowing, and I'll just. I mean, there's just lots of examples of this. If you need them for China as well, let me know and I can get them. But Putin's
Yes,
got a
because
long history of this.
we shouldn't say that they were killed if they were not in the auto catastrophe, motor vehicle accidents, or
Oh, I
if they're
mean,
very sick. Yeah.
there are
Or
lots of
they're
excuses made for convenient times of death. But it's pretty you should read through the ones that I wrote and tell me what you think.
Oh, yeah, I know all those names, but we don't have time to go in details.
And if I may respond very briefly to,
Yeah.
because I think she was asking if there were synonyms, and I think that there's a slight difference between the two words. So a dissident to me would be somebody who's actually against the current government and actually is talking about all the bad things that they're doing, but it's not really a whistleblower kind of thing.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And dissidents are not necessarily criticizing government. They may criticize exactly what you are calling whistleblowers. They may criticize anything. like economy, politics, or governing
Right.
rules and realities. They can
So, yeah.
criticize anything, and
So
they
that
can
would
take
be more,
actions.
that would be to me, that would be more political in a sense that anybody who's a for example in an election who's the opposite candidate would be a dissident to the current, I guess. You know
That's
what I
not what
mean?
I. No,
But
that's not what I'm talking.
whistleblowing is more like actually putting a spotlight to illegal activity.
That's correct. That's a definition of
Yeah.
dissident.
Okay.
It's the
Well,
same
you know,
exactly definition. Yeah.
a dissident, let me look up the exact definition of dissident.
You know, definition in Wikipedia or Google, it can be slightly
Yeah.
different because, like you said, it's in this country, but all over the world,
Right.
they use dissidents for whistleblowers.
It's
Yeah, I was
basically
going to
anyone
say
who
they
speaks out against the government's policies or
In
political system
yeah,
itself.
yes,
So
correct.
So I think
Yeah.
whistleblowers would, by that definition, be considered dissidents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would argue that dissident is a name with a negative connotation because whereas whistleblower says that you're pointing out bad behavior that should be fixed rather than fighting against the government. Now, let's say it was World War II and you gave the plans to the nuclear bomb to the Nazis, that would be a dissident kind of move, right? So
No, 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 no. That's oh gosh, I forgot the name of it.
espionage,
Uh,
but it would be a dissident that commits espionage.
Yeah.
no, no,
When I'm
espionage
thinking
is
of dissident, I'm
separate
thinking
word.
of Alex Navalny.
Yes, but he was more opponent than dissident because he was very open about that, and he led the movement,
Okay.
oppositional movement. If he would be a dissident, he wouldn't do that. He would just criticize, bringing up to the attention. But he was just the leader of opposite party. He was very ill to begin with, many, many years ago, then he got that stroke. And he was actually accused in the, not espionage, but certain illegal activities that he was doing. And now his wife
Yeah.
continues to do certain things, but she ran away from the country.
Right.
And a couple other
Yeah.
names I see here.
So, yeah, I mean, I was curious as well because I know, I guess in Russia it would be very similar, but the definition in my dictionary is a person who opposes official policy, especially that of an authoritarian state.
Yes, and this is too, this is all correct definitions, everything what I hear. Everything what I hear is correct definition of dissident.
Right.
What I understood is just different word from the rest of the world.
Right. I mean, I could see the connection to whistleblowing because the root word of dissident is to disagree. But a whistleblowing is more than disagreeing, right? A whistleblowing.
No,
They,
exactly what you just
no?
described about, no, it's much more.
Yeah,
Sometimes
that's
they're taking actions, but they
okay.
don't lead the movement. They
Right.
don't lead as opponent who is a leading oppositional movement. But dissident, everything what you describe.
A whistleblower just exposes illegal or unethical
Correct.
activities.
Yeah.
That has nothing
Yeah.
to do with opposing the government overall.
Right.
Yes, no, both. It's not opposition. It's just exactly criticizing. It's not opposition. Opposition is different definition.
I see.
But what I agree with you that in this country they're just use different words.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the same. It's just um, disagreement with existing legal activities that are imposed by the government, and it can be anything.
Yeah, and let's take an example, by the way, just to clarify the alternative perspective. If a whistleblower was totally wrong and they weren't pointing out any bad behavior, there would be no reason to punish them, right? Because if you're just saying like, look, I think stoplights are illegal, there should be no stoplights, right? And they scream to the press, no more stoplights. These things should be illegal. They slow me down every time I get on the road. Well, people are just going to laugh at that person. They don't have to be
Yeah,
tortured, put in jail, right? It's only
right.
when I'm pointing out real bad behavior that they should be put in jail. And all of the examples of whistleblowers I have when they were accused of real wrongdoing, it always fell apart in the courts that they didn't actually do those real wrong things. All they did is point out bad behavior by the government. By the way,
Right.
someone in the chat said that the U.S. kills more of its citizens than any other country, and I fact checked that with ChatGPT. Turns out not to be true, and I posted the 8 countries that kill the most of their citizens, which are in the chat for anyone interested. So Yana, thank you for your question and conversation. I don't know, did I answer your question? Like, did I answer it?
Partially, partially,
Okay.
but I don't want to take more time.
Well, raise your hand again and let's have you come back and
Okay.
let's let Alan go.
Yeah, if somebody is interested, we might.
Yeah, raise your hand. I'd love to hear what else you wanted to get at. But go ahead, Alan.
Well, my comments. I'm just going to take the other. You had such a
Please, I
pretty
want you to
good.
take the other side, Alan.
Okay,
Help me
yeah. Well,
understand it. I'm
well,
very
no,
baffled.
yeah. Well, the thing is, when we go to work, we have to agree to abide by a certain standard and a certain set of rules. And there's usually a mechanism to get the right information to the right people and to prevent wrongdoing. Every organization has that. Then you can go up to, it might be someone at the top, and but there it'll be up to the organization to make that choice how they're going to deal with the thing. These are public organizations that they are. It's very important for them to maintain the image of morality and respect to the people. And if you break that down, you're breaking down politics or breaking down the organization. The changes that occur from this can be very devastating. You can lose a lot of employment. You might lose clients. You might there are many repercussions anyway out of it. So going public on this stuff is, I think, in some cases, the wrong way to do it. It should be done within the organization and allow a gradual cleanup of the organization by the people who have the power to do that. And too often people go out there and say, oh, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make the world better. No, you're not going to make the world better. No one makes the world better. We do it slowly from the inside by changing values and the culture within an organization. And when we go work somewhere, we agree to abide by rules. And if you're breaking those rules, that's an even worse example for people, for the younger generation to follow. We have top-down organizations for a reason, because they work. And if you stop, challenge, if they're challenged all the time and ignoring the internal processes, we're going to lose those great organizations. We have to look at these things from do the benefits also, like from the organization perspective. You got to look at it. Do the benefits of doing this type of inappropriate behavior outweigh the costs? Like, for example,
go ahead.
Yeah, if you maybe it, although it's not right, but maybe the torture gives them valuable information that will be needed so that they can so that more people can survive. The same thing with all of the other things. There are benefits to it, and it's not just the power, maintaining power within the organization. It's to follow the law.
Well, it was the government that violated the law in at least one case that I gave, right? So what do you do when the government violates the law?
there's a process. Someone challenges the government. It's a legal process, and it's done through that process.
Would it surprise you to know that Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, Thomas Drake, John Kirikow, and Mark Felt all reported their problems through internal processes first and found that those internal processes never actually addressed the things that they talked about, and only after trying internal processes and finding that they were unresponsive that they actually went public? Would that surprise you?
Uh, yes, a little bit. Yes, yeah.
I can post the proof for you. So,
Oh, okay, okay.
because they
I
did.
also, if I may respond to Alan, because when he was talking about the organizations, I was thinking of Boeing, and I was going to ask him, do you consider Boeing a great organization? And I don't know how many people are familiar with there were two suspicious deaths for two whistleblowers this year for Boeing, former Boeing employees who were whistleblowers. But on the positive side of that story is that 10 more whistleblowers came forward because of that. And I'm sure that they had internal ways of dealing with things before it went public. But I think the Boeing story is a really talk about stakes here for the world and in terms of lives at stake.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
you said something very interesting, is that it's important for these organizations to maintain a reputation for fairness and justice. Do you want them to maintain a reputation for fairness and justice, or to actually be fair and just and do fair and just things? Which one is more important? If you had to choose,
I
then right now we do have to choose.
Well, I think that if they do more good things than bad things, then it's acceptable.
Well, no one's saying to rip down the entire organization and destroy it, right? Well, I mean, some people are. A lot of Trump people are saying to get rid of the Department of Education, for example, and rip down, the IRS, to remove the IRS. I don't know how they would fund the government if they do that, but so there are people saying to rip down the institutions, but in general, no one's saying to rip down these institutions. They're just saying, hey, stop doing the things that are, basically causing, your institution to like lose a reputation for being fair and just, as you were saying, Alan, because I agree with you. These organizations should have a reputation for being fair and just, but it should be one that's well deserved, not one that's hiding, there because they're hiding their injustice and lack of fairness. They should be that because that's who they are, not because that's who they pretend to be.
Very, very good points. Yeah.
Thank you. But I appreciate, Alan. I think what you're saying is really the mentality coming from the other side,
Well,
is that the ends justify the means, and we're gonna torture people because I'm gonna get some information that will save more people. But we agreed after World War II that torture was so horrible that nothing justifies torture. And actually, when you torture, what ended up happening is when it came out that the US was torturing Al Qaeda people, Al Qaeda used that for recruitment. And they started saying, look, the US is torturing our people. You guys need to join the holy war, join the holy fight, join Al Qaeda. And suddenly we had to face 3 times as many terrorists as we did before.
interesting. Yeah, I've yeah, I don't know all the facts, so but I believe in following rules, and
I'm glad. You will be the
that's
whistleblower, Alan. And
yeah.
I'm thankful because you seem like a nice guy, and I don't want you to get put in solitary for a year.
Well, exactly. I wouldn't want to, and like I've worked with people who deal with security with top secret information, and possibly I may have been too. But anyway, they have to sign a lot of documents, and
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
and it's long term imprisonment for violating those rules.
right, but usually the courts side with the perspective that as long as you do what a reasonable person would do, you're safe. And that's actually a really good thing, because we should all try to be reasonable people in any given
Mhm.
scenario. And if I'm a reasonable person working for the NSA and I see the NSA doing something illegal, to me, the reasonable thing is to actually violate those agreements. Those agreements are, should not be binding when I'm seeing illegal activity happening within a place of government. Just the same way, Alan, I hate to tell you this, but the last time you signed an online contract, it said that your firstborn gets to go to the company, and the company CEO now is the parent of your firstborn child. You have to give up your firstborn. And that could be in the contract of whoever you signed an online document that you never read to. But the truth is, no court would uphold that, right? No one's going to take your firstborn, even if the contract says that they are allowed to take your firstborn. So luckily, we're all protected by the reasonable person, and a reasonable person would never give away their firstborn. So we can't sign contracts giving them away.
Yeah, good argument.
Thank you.
So I would add that forget solitary confinement. I just don't want to be assassinated.
Yeah, well, I'd rather be assassinated than solitary confinement, I think. I don't know.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, solitary, you go insane. I mean, I can't imagine how bad that would be.
If you let yourself,
Torture to me is worse than death, because I know that if I die, I'm going to be reborn and I'm going to fight for a lot of the same stuff. So, ain't no one getting rid of me, even if they kill me.
Well, they say if you're in
Came back the
solitary.
very next day.
did you ever see a Kiss of the Spider Woman?
No.
The play?
I think so. Yeah.
So that was an ode to imagination in surviving torturous prison conditions and solitary confinement. So your imagination can make you survive, I think.
Yeah.
At least
No, I think that, yeah. Pelin, if you could go down to the bottom, and there's a little heart with react, and then click wait, I think it's under, no. Where is the raise? Oh no, there's a raise hand button on the bottom. There's a separate button for raise hand. There you go. Thanks. Jenny, go ahead.
Such a fantastic topic presentation and so informative, Garrett. Thank you so much. And I thank you also for including North Korea and shedding light as to what atrocities that Kim Jong-un has committed. Thank you so much, Garrett.
My pleasure. Carly.
Well, I think you actually covered what I wanted to say, Garrett, in response to Alan and a number of things about the moral and ethical impairment. Basically, the idea that power can corrupt the ways of doing things, and that absolute power may corrupt absolutely. To have an actual organization that does have standards and rules, etc. But how are those evaluated? Are they peer reviewed? Is there critical thinking involved? Humility? And actual culture change for when the change is needed within culture. I think it's interesting that you also brought up the idea of contracts and the fine print that as a new employee,
and we all sign on to without reading any of it.
Well, and even if we were to read the first 80 pages, it's on page 168 that there's a caveat or what have you. So a lot of that is unfortunate. And I know that corporate spying has been a thing much longer than a lot of these known whistleblowers have been. And again, because they're privatized, it's less known to us than, say, the government whistleblowers. But what your topic has been on the persecution of the whistleblowers, which is completely and ethically abhorrent, especially when you look at relatively to those that are the actual bad actors initially. So my question is there a way that organizations can update and change their internal processes? If they say we have a comment box that you must fill out the little green form and put your comment in the little box to have that be addressed, and that doesn't work because somebody is literally not allowed in the room to fill out their comment card, there have to be other ways of people alerting to the problems, but then people being held accountable and having that internal actual responsibility to do something. And I think that there's a breakdown in many, many different organizations of that very idea of being responsible. Like you said, corporate United or the Citizens United can hide behind, not any individual being individually responsible too. So there are a lot of issues at hand. And I really thank you for all the information that was presented here, because I knew half of those names, but certainly not the other half. And there's just a big big problem with what do we do with whistleblowers, because it does disincentivize us to get actual good information. If we can't trust the experts and organizations to present us with real facts, how are we supposed to combat disinformation, let alone narratives that could destroy not just a company or an organization, but a system of government or a nation, what have you. So thanks.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Carly. And actually, I talked, I kind of did this in the wrong order, but I talked on October 1st, I believe it was, about, October 1st, 2 weeks ago, on power and how the very people seeking power are the ones that we don't want to be in positions of power. We want to, encourage people who are altruists to be in positions of power. Usually the people going into positions of power are the ones that want to control, and those are the last people we want. And I like to say that power should be used to empower rather than to overpower. The people in positions of power today, when you were asking, how do you fix this within the company, or the organization, you need to have leaders that are not egotists and not going to double down on wrong and try to hide it. You need to have leaders that are going to take the moral action and say, look, my organization did something wrong. It happened without my awareness, hopefully, or if I was aware of it, I made a mistake and I'm going to change it, and I'm going to step down because I should never have authorized illegal surveillance of US citizens. And, I'm going to find all the people who, were supporters of this and root them out of the organization and then leave myself afterwards. Like that would be someone with integrity leading the organization. But we need to elect politicians that put in place people with integrity at the top of these organizations to create a world in which, and your globe prompted me to say to create a world in which, there is actually fairness and truth that are, where we're seeking truth and being fair. And that's part of what the FTI is about, is, help everyone be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth and to be fair. And so, I would really love for people that like this type of stuff to look into being a member of the FTI. I just put another link in about the FTI, and there's a doc in there about membership. And part of what I want is, to encourage people that will be better leaders to step up in leadership positions, first in local communities, and then hopefully growing from there. And I would like to encourage people who are going to be altruists and try to empower the people that they can influence rather than trying to control them. And, people who are not egotists, but people who are self-confident, human beings, but not egotistical. So, Yana, please help me understand, because I felt like I didn't quite answer your question. And so I wanted to hear from you again.
Oh, first of all, I'm grateful for this great presentation and those answers to such challenging questions. And we can move on from dissidents versus whistleblowers, except that somebody mentioned espionage. And yes, they can become spies. They definitely can. But somebody actually brought up another important topic about whistleblowers in the working place, and I want to bring up hospitals, where whistleblowing happens all the time, and those people are immediately fired, and they have very hard time to find a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a question and discussion.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree. Like if you are a whistleblower, finding a job is hard, right? You're a very public figure. Now, and like any company hiring you takes on a big risk that the people you opposed may now oppose your company, and people who support those people may now oppose your company. It's polarizing, and I think, so I don't know, Yana, if you had more of a question, but I agree with you there. I don't know if you had more that you wanted me to comment on or to say yourself.
Oh, we can leave it just where it is, because the discussion with others is such an interesting discussion. Because again, what is legal, what is illegal? Like, where do we cross that line with whistleblowing versus breaking a legal rules, because you probably know that guy, young boy who was a security guard, and he exposed some digital data, and he was immediately put in prison. I don't even know if they even brought the court. So I believe that networking and corruption actually help some people not to get any legal consequences.
Yeah.
And is the corruption at some point becomes like opposition to whistleblowing?
Say that again?
Is corruption at some point of time becomes opposite of whistleblowing? Because somebody here actually brought up opposition as well, and I think it's very interesting phenomenon, opposition, because some people are prone to that, like they don't want to keep mouth shut.
Right.
And majority of people say, oh yes, I will be like law-obedient citizen, plus I have a family, I don't want to go to jail. So they all know those things. We all know that here in United States that we do not have full democracy. I personally consider we do not have freedom of speech.
Well, you don't think we have democracy in the United States?
Because you see, either we kind of go back to ancient Greece, or we create new definition of democracy, and it might be already created, but definitely not freedom of speech, definitely not freedom of actions. And I'm not talking about actions like let's just rob your house and not to have consequences. But I personally don't think we have freedom of speech. I personally consider that gender dysphoria is a very convenient diagnosis because it's a gender identity disorder. But again, it's okay to have a difference of opinions. It doesn't polarize us if we are civilized people.
So
And
what's
the
an
same
example
about
where you think someone is not able to speak freely, where the speech doesn't cause a significant threat of harm?
I'm sorry, first part of the question was?
Maybe I'm going to give you a minute to think about this, Yana, but raise your hand again if you could. I'm looking for an example where you feel a person is not able to exhibit free speech in the United States when that free speech is not a credible threat of harm, or does not cause a credible threat of harm. All of the free speech I know that was blocked because it creates a credible threat of harm, which is the bar for free speech. Free speech doesn't mean you can say anything you want, because that would mean that someone could walk up to you with a gun in America and say, give me all your money. And as long as they don't shoot you, they're allowed to do it. Right. And that's a credible threat of harm. So that's not allowed under free speech law.
Oh, yeah, I don't go, like I said, I don't go to extremes illegal activities, but I believe there is a gray area. What does it mean, freedom of speech, and what does it mean, harm? And there is a gray area, and it's getting broader and broader and broader and broader, to the point that we have no right anymore to call he, and vice versa, just like you said. You were politically correct. But I have hard time if the person whom I know for years or decades suddenly becomes she from he. And I can't even memorize that, but it's like almost like it's not criminal yet. But this is not freedom of speech, in my personal opinion. We cannot criticize certain things, like, again, it creates opposition. Many contemporary movements, they just create opposition because the opposite party has the right, and our party does not, to do certain activities or
could you maybe, I didn't understand the question about free speech and gender dysphoria. What were you saying is where there's no free speech?
I just gave you an example, so you will see that it is gray area. It doesn't harm anyone.
What's the example? I missed it.
I just said that gender dysphoria and gender identity disorder, we are not allowed to call it gender identity disorder because they pressure professionals to change it to gender dysphoria, which is a much lower
Well,
level
this is going
of
to get
disorder.
recorded and put up on YouTube. Do you feel like the police are going to come get you because you used the other term?
That's what I'm talking about. It's not illegal.
Hmm.
It's not illegal, but there are certain things that I am not going to say in public.
Right.
There is
Because,
many things
but
that I'm
that's
not going to say even on this forum.
yeah, but that's because there's social pressure, not because there's lack of free speech. You're allowed to say those things. You just recognize that people will look at you very negatively if you say them because they're inappropriate socially within our culture.
Okay, then just another example. Whole world uses word N-word. This is the only country that is like preoccupied. We absolutely cannot use this word, period. It's offensive, it's whatever. It's not illegal, but there will be consequences. Those consequences are negative, despite they themselves using this word, just not in the United States.
I think that's what Garrett is saying. So you're actually agreeing with him.
Yeah.
About the consequences, the social consequences of using a word.
Right.
But I wanted to piggyback on what Yana said about the fact that we're not in a democracy, and that seemed to surprise you, Garrett. But I think we can make we could argue that the fact that the democracy is the illusion and oligarchy is the reality in this country.
Correct. Oh, I 100% agree with you on that. And we
So-
live here in oligarchy in United States, and nobody wants to acknowledge it, that basically huge corporations are leading our country.
Because the illusion of democracy is very, it's an incredibly
So
powerful.
there's a
Yeah.
slight distinction that I'll make, and what I'll acknowledge is that even before Citizens United, policy decisions were only made with consideration to the top 10% of income earners. So you could look at that and say we're in an oligarchy, and you could give up and say, look, there's no point voting anymore because we're already in an oligarchy. It can't get any better. But that's not true. We have representatives that are actually trying to represent the population. And each one of you could decide to run for office and try to represent the population. And we could choose to vote for those people if we want to. We have the power because we do have a free and fair democracy and we can vote. We just happen to be voting in people who are egotistical oligarchs. And we're voting
Correct.
them in with democracy. Now, the laws are made by oligarchs because we're voting in oligarchs. If we voted in populists that were actually populists that cared about the population, and I look to, the only people that I see that, seem to be like this are the Justice Democrats, which is like the Bernie AOC group, and they're off base in some places to me too, but they at least seem to have good intentions. And I don't see many politicians that I can say that about. So there are people that are running that have good intentions and want to help the average citizen, but we have to vote those people in.
Yeah, but then there's the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right? Which
What's
is
that?
the idea. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the movie. Have you ever seen?
I didn't see it.
So Jimmy Stewart, idealist politician, goes to Congress, becomes a senator, and there's basically it's a disillusioned story about the realities of the government. So as far as I'm as idealist as you are, but our representatives are not representing us. They're spending 70% of their time raising money for their reelection. There's a lot of backroom dealing going on that always horrifies me. Every time there's a bill where you go, wow, what a great bill, and then you see all the freaking, I don't know what they call it, the
repercussions or
all the stuff that they add
yeah.
to make it pass, which is to me
Right.
it's kind of like it's just it's sickening the way the government works. And so that's what I mean. Like when I mean oligarchs, I didn't mean the actual people with the money. I meant all the lobbying, all the stuff that's on illegally.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of stuff that I think probably 90, well, not 90, but I would say at least 60% of Americans, if they were aware of it, would be disgusted by it and want it to change. What
Mm-hmm.
I want to do with the FTI is make more people aware, help them have the critical thinking skills to know the difference between what's fact and fiction and wisdom and folly, and
Yeah.
then try to empower the average individual to take back our democracy while we still can, because we may not have much time of that left. So that said, I want to get to Kerry because he's had his hand up and waiting patiently, and Penland has been waiting even more patiently. And since we have plenty of time, I'm going to let Kerry go first, but we'll get to you, Penland, in just 1 second.
Okay.
And I think you mentioned that actually I can give example real quickly. I live in Santa Barbara, and our people voted for no smoking within Santa Barbara city. And I think that's a great example of democracy. So democracy is not quite dead. But if they would do the same on the federal level,
Yes.
there would be no reason even talk about it.
This is part of why I'm such a big fan of local government, Yana, because you know, if we have local government, we have a small enough group that we can agree on stuff and run things the way we want to locally. But certain rights, I think, should be allowed to all U.S. citizens, and that's what federal government is for. And certain requirements should be required of all U.S. citizens. But that's another, you know, states' rights versus federal rights is another story for another day.
Yeah. And everybody knows that you cannot run for the office if you don't have certain amount of either income or property or your work.
I know a guy from my university that maxed out his credit cards to get elected to the US House. So some people don't have lots of money that are doing it. They're literally risking everything, you know, and they want to be good representatives. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, but my guess is someone who's willing to do that is actually going for, you know, for a positive reason, but I don't know for sure. So that said, Kerry, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, Zoom dropped me, but thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Garrett. This comment is in sort of response to Alan, who I think kind of shone a spotlight in this particular area. Is the question basically, do the ends justify the means? Because that seems to be the big argument coming from the government side of things, is that, oh, look, we need to break the law in order to keep the system running. And in my way of thinking, that's just complete bullshit. If we're going to accept that, you might as well just ditch the rule of law altogether, right? Because that's what you got if you can break it whenever you decide, well, it's really important this time, so we're just going to set the law books aside and go rogue.
Kerry, that actually almost happened. It turns out Trump was preparing documents with his lawyers to take military control of the country and not have a peaceful transition of power. But I'm pretty sure that once the generals got wind of that, it got shot down and given up because they weren't going to back him, basically, which is kind of a test, you know, a passing of our test as a democracy. But I think it's interesting for people to know that. I didn't know that until one of my friends told me about it. So that, you know, that means that it wasn't once, it wasn't twice, it was 3 times that Trump tried to stop the peaceful transition of power. One time violently, where in January 6th, they had a kill list of all the people that didn't agree with Trump that they were trying to kill that day. And they got really close to doing it. But anyway, I'm digressing. I don't mean to sidetrack us.
No worries.
Thank you, Kerry. Helen, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, my name is Palin.
Palin. Okay, thank you, Palin.
I was just going to make a comment. So they also target people like me and you, like general public, just because you write something on Facebook or like on social media, you I don't know, expose something about government or secret projects, or just because they don't like you, like they may not like your beliefs, your background, or if you're like speaking out. And there's this targeting program, like FBI, for example, they put you on a watch list, like ordinary citizens, and it is called slow kill program. Like they torture you remotely through directed energy weapons like cell phone towers, satellites, and people, there is voice to skull, like people hear voices in their heads. And a lot of American citizens are going through that. They're called targeted individuals, and they're just regular, like they're not famous, they're not like publicly known people. And so there's this targeted justice program right now that started a lawsuit against the intelligence agencies, you know, the government. And we were actually at the Colorado Spring this summer. We had a gathering. And then there's Targeted Massachusetts. If you want to learn more about this targeting program, what people go through and, you know, their stories. Targeted Justice, they hold meetings regularly. And then Targeted Justice also, they hold meetings. So yeah, it's very sad. Some, you know, some people end up dying, like some people get murdered. Their body just can't handle the torture anymore. And there was this scientist called Dr. Robert Duncan. He was part of creating this technology. He was working for the intelligence. And when he found out what the technology was used for, he became an activist for targeted individuals. And he was writing books about this program. And then he got murdered by directed energy weapons recently. So it's way bigger than you think. And yeah, right now, a lot of people go through torture. A lot of people go through suffering. And I met them personally. They're just everyday people.
Are you,
Sometimes,
can I ask you, Palin, are you one of those targeted individuals?
yeah, I'm a targeted individual. I think mine is not as intense as most people. Like I don't have voice to skull. Usually like I feel like they don't like the things that I put on social media. And they don't like my position, like where I stand. And I think they just don't like me. So like I get sometimes frequency attacks. But I met people who have it worse than me.
Can you describe what you feel are your symptoms, or what you feel they're doing to you, and how do you know that it is true, is my
I did
question.
a lot when it happens to you. Like I did a lot of research, and then I found these groups like Targeted Massachusetts, Targeted Justice, and then you know after you do research, you understand what's happening to you. But mine is I got beamed at night one time, and my entire body was hydrating so badly, dehydrating so badly, and my muscles started to contract so bad, and I felt pins and needles all over my brain. And at the time I didn't know what the targeting program was, but I saved myself through detoxification. And then that was just one time. And then I was living with a roommate at the time. And then I rented my own place. I was living by myself, and then it started to be regular. How I understood it is I'm someone who does a lot of research. I watch a lot of international media. And I listened to this mathematician who talked about the frequency of Wi-Fi. And he said that the frequency of Wi-Fi vibrates the water molecules in our bodies. And then he said something like, you know, sometimes they target spiritual people and they like suck, you know, they draw their energy. Like it was very interesting topic. But after I listened to that conversation, I started to feel things that were happening in my body. Like I was feeling pins and needles all over my body, like frequencies. And I remembered that video, and I was like, I think that's what they're doing to me. And I had a lot of like dehydration. And then it starts slow, and then over time they like tortured, for example, my knee. Like I felt a lot of pressure sensation in my brain. And then they also like they rape you, like they direct these frequencies to your private parts, to your most sensitive places in your body, to drive you crazy, because it does drive you crazy. Like it's so annoying. And it's like it's nonstop for some people. You have like this burning sensation. You're burning, you're dehydrating, your throat hurts, they attack your thyroid, they attack your brain a lot. Like you feel the frequencies coming and leaving all the time. It's
I
pretty
wonder if
hurtful.
I wonder if it's similar to the do you know that story about the Havana?
Yes, yes, it is very similar to it's actually pretty much the
They did
same.
actually quite a few stories on 60 Minutes about it. I wonder if
Yes, it's pretty much the same, but it's constant, like it's every day. So what happens is these people start aging fast, they lose their health, they slowly die because it's continuous. So these frequencies are really they damage your health. And sometimes I will think that they target people who speak out, but they also target people just randomly for experimental purposes, just to experiment on people. Like they want to see how effective their weapons are. They want to see like, they pick the most resisting person or the strongest person to see how long they can tolerate the torture. They want to see like how far people can go, how tolerant they are. Like they're just perfecting their weapons through people. Like they use it on us, and then
do you know who they is?
to
You keep
perfect their
saying they a
weapons.
lot.
It's intelligence agencies.
From the United
Actually,
States?
there are FBI whistleblowers. I don't even like it's on the media. There are FBI agents who are targeted for being a whistleblower. It's intelligence agencies. I believe that military is involved. I think they have like contractors, like they hire people to do this job for them. So like a criminal contractor. So they're like, people who have nothing to do in life. They get paid and they involve in this type of programs for just for money. They're able to watch, they're able to see through the walls. They can listen to your conversations remotely. This is like a rabbit hole. It goes so deep, like there's no end to that. There's dream manipulation, there's V2K. There are like so many things.
Are you reading about it, Garrett?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Sorry.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask Palin if you have any links that we could follow up on that.
I
if
I
definitely
went to the
can.
site targetedjustice.com. Is that what you're referring to, Palin?
Yeah, they're the ones who started the lawsuit. And also there's Targeted Massachusetts. Targeted Massachusetts was the first group that I found because I was living in Boston when I got targeted. So
the one thing that makes me a little concerned about what's on the website is it says that if you have COVID shots, there's nanographene in your body and you have illegal implants.
Oh yeah, this goes very deep. Targeted people have chips in their bodies. Like I have a chip in my body on my crown right here, and I'm feeling it. Like even when I touch it, I feel, and it's connected to satellites. So they hear, I think they read my thoughts. I don't know, I don't exactly know the mechanism, but we have chips in our bodies. I have chips in my body. It goes to my heart. My heart is vibrating. I feel the frequencies. If they want to hurt me, like if they want to hurt my heart, they do that. And then they hurt my knees. It's like I feel like something is rolling on my crown, and I feel like frequencies around there all the time. And a lot of people have the same thing. Like it's not just me. Other targeted individuals have the same thing. It's terrible. Like right now, the situation is way worse than you think.
have you
Palin,
ever?
what I would suggest, and there are a couple of people making these comments on the chat, is I don't know if you've talked with your doctors about the symptoms you're feeling and whether or not there might be another explanation for them.
Yeah, the doctors don't understand it. Like they don't understand what's going on. And then the ones that do, there's a doctor in Florida, for example. There are some people who does like tests on you and like a frequency test. They're able to locate the chips in your body. Some doctors do that. But some of them got targeted for doing that. So some of the doctors got scared and they didn't want to involve. They're kind of like it's not possible to reach them or make an appointment. So yeah, some people's really like kind of scared of this program because they don't want to be next.
So so as somebody who really kind of always likes to weigh in whether something is true or not, right? Like there's this the quote about paranoia, right? It says just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you or something like that. Which
Yeah,
is like,
targeted individuals
you
get
never
this a
know,
lot.
right? Like you don't like it could be true, but it could also be a conspiracy theory, right? And
Yeah,
so
targeted
kind of like
individuals.
weighing the two because
Mhm.
because an MRI will quickly figure that out in an
The
instant.
technology is very advanced.
Okay.
MRI doesn't show the chips, but
Okay.
even, I mean, they like own everyone and everything. Like they can, I don't know, they have their own people in hospitals, for example. Like they can just, print like a false report, or they can hide the information. Like they have their people everywhere also.
But what do you
I
Um,
think
think
is the answer,
I
Taylor?
think it's important to remember, Palin, like
mhm,
that you can only control what's in your control. And even if what you're saying is true, which I am not yet convinced,
mhm.
but even if it's true, all you can do is the best you can do. And and I think it's worth talking with your doctors and seeing if they might be able to come up with another explanation for what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I'll try to do further research to see, what I can learn about this. It's not something I'm familiar with other than the
Yeah,
the
that's why I brought it up because we targeted individuals get this a lot. We have people not believing us, and then people are very suspicious. They think like we're making things up or that we're not important, why they would target us. So we get this a lot, but I
I'm
highly
not saying, Palin, that I don't believe you. I'm saying I don't know
uh-huh.
enough to form an opinion yet, and I would love
Yeah.
you to understand why you believe this, especially the part about the illegal implants, because a lot of this stuff, like, I haven't heard of a whistleblower that came out in the US government talking about this program, even though there have been whistleblowers about so many other illegal programs, even though they've been treated so poorly. So then we have to ask ourselves, well, if all of this is true and there are these great many, powers in the government that are being enacted on people unjudiciously and unjustly, then why have there not been whistleblowers in those areas?
There are. You just once you start doing research, you will be like, oh my God, there's so much information. I cannot even absorb this. Like for example, you can buy Dr. Robert Duncan's books. Unfortunately, he was murdered recently through directed energy weapons. But he was one of the person who was involved in this program in developing this program. He taught
What's
he
his
he
name?
wanted to Dr.
Robert.
Robert Duncan. I can put it on chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, he was actually working on this technology because he was doing it like for adversaries. Like he thought this technology was going to be used for enemies. But then he realized that it was used on innocent people, and then he became an activist. And his books are really kind of difficult to understand, but it's very useful. There's so much information, and he has a lot of like YouTube videos. But once you start doing research, you will encounter the whistleblowers. There are whistleblowers from FBI, there are whistleblowers from even CIA. They're the ones who are really like they're the developers of this program, but there are whistleblowers from them too. There are whistleblowers from military, from government, from people who work in NSA. Because there was this one woman, I forgot her name, but she exposed something about 9/11, that there was a like a miscommunication between FBI and CIA, like their warnings were ignored, and she got targeted. And so there's so many information, but yeah, my purpose was to like bring awareness to just to letting you know like the situation is, how badly it is, how everyday people, like everyday American citizens, not just America, this is a global thing, by the way, but America and England are the starters of, like, they're the builders of this program, and then it became global. How like it's worse than you think, and I think it's important to educate yourself about this, just to understand like where
Yeah.
humanity is and how
So
bad things are.
Palin, if we could, I'd love to move this to the online community. If you
Sure.
go to our website, we have a Discord community, and I'd love to see some of your sources there if you're able to share them there, so that we could look more into this for those interested.
Okay.
Thank you,
Just
Palin. And Will,
be
go
aware,
ahead.
Garrett, that you may be targeted.
What's that?
Just be aware that you may be targeted.
I may.
By the way, some people don't
In
know
fact,
that
I'd
they're
be shocked
targeted.
if I'm not by now. So
That's
Some
what I'm
people
just wondering about.
some people don't know that they're targeted because it's not as intense, and they're targeted at a level, but they don't know about that.
all right, Will, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. I was just going to say I actually thought I'd lowered my hand, but looks like AI is raising my hand. Maybe AI wants me to speak.
I will
There's a
lower.
movie, an AI falls in love with a human.
If you put your hand up in real life, it actually raises your hand on the
film.
app. So
I think that did happen, didn't it? There's
Yeah.
some guy in Google said he was being
It's
stalked
all
by
advanced technology now.
yeah,
If you raise your
good
hand
good
right
film.
now,
It was a good film there. What was I going to say? Yana, I'm just curious when people say there's no free speech, what do you actually want to say that you're not legally allowed to
I
say
think we
now?
clarified, Will. She just means that you get socially pressured not to say certain things in our culture, that certain things are politically incorrect, and therefore you'll be socially punished for saying them. Am I right, Yana?
Correct. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was great discussion, and I think we closed the topic. I just
Yeah.
wanted to
And
bring this topic.
Yana, you're right. I would just say that if you want to understand why some of the things that there's social pressure against, why that social pressure is there, I'd love to continue that conversation in the online community. If you feel like there's undue social pressure in certain areas, we might be able to talk about it and better understand each other's perspective, and maybe I'll have something to say that you don't know, or maybe you'll have something to say I don't know.
I
And
think,
now-
yeah, if I will not know something, which I really doubt, I will definitely let you know. Because I know we have quite a few disagreements on certain topics, and I do accept it. I
That's
accept
okay,
the
Yana. It's
difference
okay
of
to disagree
opinion.
as long as we try better to
Yeah.
understand each other's perspective.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the important
totally.
part.
And
Oh, yeah.
in addition to social repercussions, now we could add the targeting system. So that would actually prove that there's no free speech if you speak against something and then you get targeted.
That's very well said.
Yes.
And even I'm not really having any problem. Government loves me and so on. I was very welcomed in this country and I have great life. I know that I am under constant surveillance. I don't have those symptoms that are just awful, but I have too many proofs. Sometimes they are better, they're getting better, and sometimes it's getting really very scary. But of course, I don't have any symptoms that the lady, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, but she described certain things that, yeah, that never happened, of course, with me. But I know it does exist. I definitely know that.
Okay.
I can only speak from my own experience, of course.
Thanks, Yana. By the way, I love your background picture and the thing.
Thank you. It's
nice.
photo modeling in China.
Cool.
Yeah, I love it too. It just reminds me. I learned, by the way, a lot about China.
Good.
And I can talk about it forever, guys, because I
Well,
was
if you want to
talking
do a
with...
presentation, Yana, reach out to me offline.
Oh, gosh, I'm just so busy, but I can bring it up just for the discussion, a few topics. And I know it will be a lot of negativity. I'm ready to face it. But I believe if we do live in a freedom of speech, we really should know firsthand experiences. But and after I came back, I actually tried to find anything positive about China in English language. And believe or not, all presentations were negative, except those people who actually did live in China. But I don't want to bring this topic if there is no interest in our group. if there is an interest, we can just discuss this topic. I'm just so excited about that country.
Thanks, Shanna. Carrie, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to make or run a proposal by you, Garrett, and see what you
Yeah.
think in terms of making the system more robust and reversing this kind of perverse incentive or chilling effect that happens when whistleblowers get crushed by the system. And what it would be is if a whistleblower documents that they have provided an internal critique, that would say initiate a one-time safe harbor for the perpetrators of that, where if they stop the behavior and disclose in kind of a truth and reconciliation process the transgression, everything's cool. If they don't, and the whistleblower has to then either go public or go to, a higher form of government or governance, and I mean, this could go for corporate actors as well. At that point, then somebody needs to go to prison.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I don't see. I keep
I
hearing about
agree
all
with you.
these
There's no
bad acts.
accountability to the people doing the wrongdoing.
Exactly.
Like they seem to be, not only is there no accountability, we don't even know their names. We
Right?
don't know who approved the torture of, Al-Qaeda prisoners. Like, we don't know who did that. We don't
Yeah.
know, the people that, were in charge of authorizing Abu Ghraib. Like, we don't know who these people are, as far as I'm aware. Like, and maybe Abu Ghraib we do actually, but that was one that was like got a lot more scrutiny. But a lot of these things, we don't know who the real, the senior people were that made these decisions, because
Well,
like
and that's what
getting the
happens. They
junior people
hang.
in trouble is what's common, but the getting the actual senior people who are in positions of power that authorize this stuff tends not to happen, and that we should be concerned about because those
Yeah.
There
people
are
are still
groups,
there in
there are
bigger
groups
positions of power
beyond
than they
the
ever
people in
were.
power.
Yeah,
What's
like
that?
at Nuremberg,
There are
they
groups that
weren't.
are beyond the people in power. There's a group controlling the politicians and the presidents and stuff. Like, it's higher.
Yeah. Well, when they had, Nuremberg, they weren't trying the guards at Auschwitz. They were going for the people at the top of the food chain, and that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
More than with Abu Ghraib. That's exactly what they did. They got a couple of low-level people who were, walking around at the prison doing the deeds, so to
Right.
speak, but nobody making the policy or turning a blind eye and
Right.
authorizing it, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Exactly. And Carl, it sounded like you have a theory of that there's someone that, like, it sounds like the puppet theory where the government, you feel like maybe is not the one in charge. There's a
So
shadow group, or
everybody has heard of the Illuminati, right? So
well,
there's
I know the Illuminati of Bavaria.
yeah,
So
well,
the
yeah.
Illuminati,
There's
the
also
original
the
Illuminati
what is
were a
that group?
group.
What is that group that meets every year? Is it Davos?
Davos. Yeah.
Davos.
I don't
There's
think
a lot of
that's
secrecy behind that. That
I
kind of
don't
makes
think
me,
that's I don't think
you know.
that's the Illuminati, but
And for those who've read any of David Icke's books about the lizard people that came from outer space and stuff like that, yeah,
there's
there's a
that
lot of
theory
proof.
too.
There's a lot of
Hypothesis,
thick
I should
books
say.
with a lot of evidence. Yes.
Yeah. So,
But it
um,
actually brings up actually a very important, especially since we talk about philosophy and reality and all that stuff. That I don't know if you spoke about this before, Garrett, but the idea of how do we know or how can we tell if something is a conspiracy theory or there's truth to it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you just went, yeah.
no, I was just telling my daughters to close the door because my wife's sleeping there. Cierra la puerta. Cierra la puerta. Adentro o afuera.
Carl, that's a good point. The combating misinformation and
Yeah.
disinformation, conspiracy theories, and bad actors that actually have a
I was,
particular narrative to push.
Yeah, I was actually trying to find in my notes because I remember I attended a presentation. Oh, I think I found it, which was about critical thinking and misinformation, and they had this acronym called CRAP, like CRAAP, and basically it's like 5 questions that you can ask yourself. The first one, C, is currency, which is the information timely? R, is it relevant to the topic? A is authorship, like who is the source of the information? A is accuracy. And P, probably for me, the most important is purpose. What is the purpose of that communication that you're hearing that's making you, is it to make you afraid, to make you outraged, right? Like, I'm sure everybody's heard that we live in the outrage economy right now, right? Social media is all about making you outraged about stuff because they find that that's the best way to get action. But a lot of it is misinformation, as we know. So we should have a way to be able to figure out, like, you know, when they mention, well, they're doing this, who's they, and what's their purpose? Like, why are they doing that? And when things don't really add up logically, that's when you can start maybe wondering if it's true or not, you know, because every single conspiracy theory actually has some grain of truth to them, which is why they're easy to believe. You know, everybody can show a piece of evidence that, see, this is true, therefore everything else is true, right? Which is flawed thinking. So,
like flat Earth.
Yeah. Although flat Earth, I don't know if they've ever actually had anything that remotely seem like it is true physically, other than their perception that it is flat. I think that's the only thing that they mentioned. But anyway.
So yeah, I think it is important to, you know, be able to keep an open mind to everything you hear, but also, you know, part of what we talk about in the FTI is the 5 intentions. The second of which is to transparently share what you believe with other people to the extent that you trust them, and then to keep an open mind to what they say so that you'll understand if you may have you know, a misunderstanding. And number 3, the intention number 3 is to improve your critical thinking skills, which helps you take that new information in and better discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly. And so, you know, by honing our critical thinking skills, we can get better at figuring out what's a conspiracy theory, what's real, you know, especially in this day and age with artificial intelligence. There's so much that can be fabricated, and there are so many people trying to like tell false stories that it's harder than ever to tell the difference between what's true and what's not. And so, you know, that's a part of what we try to do in the FTI, is to help each other sort of seek truth and be fair, and get closer to the truth by having an open mind and better critical thinking skills. So that's go ahead.
And the awareness too, that cognitive, not cognitive, confirmation bias is probably the biggest factor.
Yes, confirmation bias is one of the biggest enemies.
Discounting evidence and keeping evidence to prove your point. Yeah.
Right. And Yana, go ahead.
I wanted to make 2 points, but I forgot what is the second one. And the first, that I really like conspiracy theories, just like you said. If we look for the logic, for the facts, except the flat earthers, of course, it's quite possible. Like, I had my own theory, which was very, very logical about the origin of coronavirus. And it was a lot of research that did confirm that theory. Actually, I had 2 theories. But it was like inconvenient truth, which, you know, doesn't change my lifestyle. And oh gosh, and I forgot the second point. It was something. Oh, now it's more important issue. I definitely agree with you about governing. I don't know if we can say it governing, but organizations of very influential groups. And some of them are even unknown because they just managed to make it so secretive that, like, no leaking information, basically. But also I wanted to mention oligarchs. And Soros, first of all, he's ruling the kingdom. And at least we know who he is. But they say there is several hundred, if not thousands, of those people, and by the way, including our CIA, and not those little spies. They're like serious people. But of course, most definitely we have no clue who they are. because no one is ever going to disclose it. But anyway, I just wanted to make a point that I totally agree about both points, and we can talk more about it because maybe somebody has more information than I do.
Yep.
I posted a link to a documentary I recently saw about flat earthers. Actually, it's a really great documentary that really focuses on the psychology of it, because it'll make you see it in a different light. I mean, it's really very interesting how they filmed it.
You know, I'm grateful for that because I couldn't find any good documentaries except like kind of like, oh gosh, I forgot the word. Like those that try to prove that it's wrong, and I don't know, maybe they filter information. Like right now, all truth about 9/11 is coming out, but there are still documentaries that it's not true. So it's kind of like two different opinions.
Right, and it's up to our critical skills to really weigh both sides and figure out what is true and what is not.
Yeah, and to look for facts, just for facts. Like
Absolutely.
example with 9/11 will be that they found that explosives they would put at certain times they even know what time it was, and that explosion happened early morning because it was not enough time. They did a lot of experiments, and they say it was not enough time to create such enormous amount of fire just from the airplane that is flying, unless it would be flying already like a ball of fire. But anyway, there were some great documentaries on that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of information. I mean, it's been what, 11, 13 years.
Exactly, yeah. And they were just looking for facts. And it's not even emotional. I think the most important criteria of truthfulness versus not is how much emotions people put in that. And I know that we always argue with Will about people hitting the planet. Or let me reframe it.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical.
I would argue that emotions do drive a lot of people's beliefs, but emotions have nothing to do with facts, meaning
right. You cannot
facts are more powerful than feelings.
And logic. You know, if certain things, if A is not connected to B, you cannot use it as a fact.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you have to put it in the context.
Deductive reasoning.
Agreed. And in fact, we talked about, I think you mentioned, like, did you mention global warming, Yana?
Oh yeah, oh my gosh, this is my favorite topic because I did so much research. And plus, you know, I studied some sciences back in university related to this topic, like physics or physics like chemistry, implication of climate and cosmos on the human health and on and on. And somebody mentioned microwaves. Of course, they're harmful. Of course, and they affect so many ways, like everybody now admires those auroras. And they're like so harmful to our brain because we are mostly, if somebody is interested in quantum science, we are mostly empty space. We are just collection of different waves. Most of them are electromagnetic. So we are super susceptible. But what they're feeding us, that is beautiful, and we are so lucky to have them even in the South Texas. And if you will find any documentaries or scientific articles, please send me because I couldn't find anything, at least in English language.
So we did an event on global warming, and I did quite a fair amount of research for that, and I found that since Earth's formation, the fastest that Earth's temperature has gone up 1 degree Fahrenheit prior to 200 years ago was in 266,000 years roughly. It took to go up on average 1 degree Fahrenheit. A lot of conservatives will say, well, we're in perfectly within the normal bounds of Earth's temperature fluctuations historically. And not only is that true, we're actually coming out of an ice age. An ice age just means that there's ice on the polar caps. So when people worry that the polar caps are melting, that alone shouldn't worry us. What should worry us is the fact that prior to 200 years ago, it took 266,000 years to go up 1 degree Fahrenheit, and we've gone up 2 degrees in the last 200 years. That's really scary. Like that's like we're going to turn
Right,
into a fireball when
right. And we
if we
can
don't
talk
kill
about it a
ourselves
lot.
first.
Yeah, we can talk about it a lot, but the most important factor is that our planet is moving towards the sun, and it happens very fast. And the
We're actually
second factor,
moving away from the sun, Yana. But the sun is expanding faster than we're moving away from the
yes,
sun. And so
that's
eventually the sun will envelope the earth, but we got a couple billion years for that.
right, right. I agree. So it doesn't
Not
happen
a
very
huge
often.
rush.
Right. Then we don't talk about pollution versus increase of CO2 for the expenses of the ocean, because most of CO2 is stored in the ocean, and it's nothing to do with electrical vehicles, despite they're good. Another point is pollution. We don't really talk much about pollution. And
Yeah.
that's what is a privilege. Like I just came from the city of 25 million, and I couldn't understand why the air was so clean. And then they explained to me that 60% of cars are electrical, and all scooters, motorcycles, electric bicycles, they're all electric. They're very inexpensive and affordable there, and better and better quality. And design is just gorgeous. I couldn't believe that design. And the government actually encourages green vehicles versus combustion. And with combustion, they create certain days that you cannot even drive them through the city. So I think this is a great direction versus saying that electrical vehicles will save the planet. Because we are just little insects on this planet.
So I'm gonna actually on the thing of pollution, I'm gonna post the thing and then we'll probably close down. But I want to post an article about how the head of the Ziploc empire is on a crusade to rein in plastic waste, and it talks about how the CEO of Johnson, who happens to be a graduate with 5 degrees from Cornell, basically uses recycled plastics from the oceans, new materials made from silicon, and new compostable materials for products and packaging. So, hopefully, more and more people, especially those that are causing the pollution, will be more aware of the pollution and trying to minimize it. So that said, we digressed a little bit at the end because I think we covered the whistleblower topic quite well. And I just want to thank everybody for the great questions, comments. And Palin, thanks for sharing your story. I know it's difficult to be vulnerable about some of that stuff, and thanks for sharing. And we'd love to chat with everybody in the online community. If you go to freethinkerinstitute.org, the link to our Discord community is there. Please introduce yourself in the Introduce Yourself channel. If you have an organization, you can introduce your organization as well. And hope to see everybody at next week's session. I forget what next week's is. Let me look it up real quick. Oh, next week is
21st.
Christ Path Shamanism,
22nd.
I think. Is that right?
What is it?
I think so. I think it's a shamanism conversation. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
That's one of my favorites too. I've seen so many shamans.
So it's kind
And
of a combination of Christianity and shamanism. So come next week. Hi
I
Diana.
will.
We're
It's so
just ending now.
impressive. Yeah, it's impressive to meet with group of intellectuals who just into facts, facts, facts.
We all are all about facts. So
I love it. Yeah.
great to
And
chat
Garrett,
with you all. Hope you all have a great night. What's that called?
Garrett, you wanted some feedback on your presentation.
Oh
So,
yes. What do you think?
well,
Was
definitely a big plus to the previous ones for sure.
okay.
It was
So you
very
like the
pleasant.
graphics?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll try to
Yeah,
keep doing that if I can find the time, and I probably have to subscribe to the tool that I used, but I don't mind paying 20 or 30 bucks a
So
month for it.
ChatGPT can help you do it, with all its multi.
Not like formatting the presentation and stuff. Like, I try to spend most of my time on the research, and so, but I'll try to make it look nice too. I know people care about aesthetics more than I do. So thanks a lot, everybody. Hope you all have a good night.
Thank you,
thank you.
Garrett. Thank you.
Great
Thank you. Good night.
presentation.
Bye, Garrett.
Bye, Garrett's daughter.
Bye.
Bye-bye.